redeemed, rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. This is your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. Guys, I am looking forward to this podcast today with my guest, Kyle Seraphin. Just a quick story. We've just had a podcast offline, but now we're actually going to be recording a podcast. I've gotten to know Kyle Seraphin just a little bit. He is a fun and interesting guy, and I'm sure that'll come across in the podcast. Actually, obviously, many of you guys already know him. If you listen to his podcast, you've heard him on interviews, so I'm sure you already know that. But I'm just getting to know him, and I'm happy to say he's the real deal Holyfield. I'm a blue collar guy. I love guys that are real American guy, just no fake or phony about him. This is one of those guys. So Kyle Seraphin, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast.
Thank you, Carl. You know, when I'd go meet people when I was working as a federal agent, they'd always go like, you're not really what I expected when I met the FBI. And I go, oh yeah, feds, they're a bunch of nerds. And then everybody always laughs. And then now they talk to you because you're just a regular person. And they do have expectations when they meet you. You come in and everybody, it doesn't matter who you are. If you work for the FBI, you're the entire FBI to that person. And so I always thought, like, we get one shot at this. We get one shot to be a real human being. We get one shot to go out there and make a connection as a person. They call it establishing rapport, right? But it's just being real. And a lot of folks have a hard time with that. And that's because I came from a sales background. I just understand that you got to be a person first. Your job is always second.
Man, that is so cool. So anyway, yeah, I've enjoyed speaking to you. And so now I know the audience will as well. The funny thing is, I want you to share a little bit of this story because I'm finding out that this guy is like the Swiss Army knife when it comes to trades. And that's totally, honestly, I think that makes you more real. It's one of these people that, when you share stories, you're going to be the guy that's going to have the great stories that people want to listen to because you know a little bit of everything. Once you just tell people a little bit about your background, Kyle.
So
like everything you've been involved in, work-wise and the stuff your buddies tease you about, including the jet ski.
They do. My buddies give me a hard time because whenever they go do something, one of my buddies was going to go buy a jet ski or looking at buying a jet ski. And he was like, I'm sure Kyle used to sell them in the 90s because every time they'll bring something up, I always have some connection to it. But that's the way my brain works. And part of that's because I came out of a sales background. And part of it is just because I have like just this wild jumping from thing to thing. I went to 10 different schools before I got into high school. I graduated from high school in Dallas. I went to the University of Oklahoma. And then from there, I ended up moving to San Francisco, which is near where I was born. I worked in a radio station selling airtime. I sold ergonomic office furniture to like high-end clients and then also unions for a while. It was kind of strange. I sold, $20+ million worth of Dell computers when I worked in Texas. I ran a couple of restaurants. I was homeless for a little bit of time. I was thinking about enlisting. And then I ended up working at Warner Brothers as a financial analyst. And I actually left, $80,000 to $100,000 a year job, depending on the overtime, to go make $20,000 or $18,000 in the United States military because I really wanted to do that. And then I got out of that and I was like, I'm a paramedic, I'm an air traffic controller, I'm a combat diver. Like I've got all these little cards that I can kind of attest to. So what am I going to do? And I started working for a hospital. I thought I might go back and go to med school or something. So I was a paramedic on an ambulance. I worked in an ER. And then, I thought my wife and I were going to just like leave the world and go start a bed and breakfast in Vermont, if you can actually imagine that. But we actually moved all of our stuff and went to Vermont to go do it. And we hated Vermont. So that was a shame. And we go through all this kind of wild stuff. And I end up getting hired by the FBI. And I'm 35 years old when I left tutoring kids for the summer to get themselves, ready for the next grade. And then I went to the FBI Academy. So that was kind of the progression. So you show up there and all of your colleagues are doing these like, they used to work for the CIA or they were a SWAT team commander in Indianapolis or whatever. They were the bureau chief for the Washington Post down in Bogota and like all this other like really kind of cool sounding stuff. I was a prosecutor for 10 years. And so they get to me and they're like, what was your background? And I was like, I was a stay-at-home dad with no kids. That was my last job. and everyone's like, well, what was your degree in? And I was like, it was multidisciplinary studies. It's exactly what it sounds like. And then I would sit back down because I always want to undercut the expectations. Like, I don't need to tell you that I trained to be a special operator with the dudes and that I was like doing, dive training in the, in Panama City Beach with a bunch of dudes who were like in the, Navy, or what do they call Marine recon guys. I don't need to be that. That's That's like a thing people find out if they get to know you for a little while. It's more funny to undersell yourself and then pop up with the, well, when I was living in London, I did this. And, like I got really sick on the ferry over to, going over to France. And people are like, what? I'd rather hit them with that and catch them off guard. But it allows you to connect to people in different ways. And a lot of it is, like I said, I moved around a bunch. My dad ran radio stations. It wasn't a military thing. And by doing that, I constantly was connecting with people. And I still do that. I just do it instinctively at this point.
Man, that's honestly, it's pretty cool. It definitely makes you feel like a real guy. Obviously, you're a real guy, and it's honestly speaking to you. I'm like, if the FBI were made up of people like you, I would feel completely safe. I would feel completely happy. But it's not, and that's kind of what I want to segue into here, Kyle. I'm the FBI. I guess let's start here. I asked you a question yesterday. I'm going to ask you a series of questions, some of which I asked you yesterday, some new ones that I thought up that I wanted to speak to you about. And I guess I want to start here. Should average Americans, the real Americans, if you will, your blue collar working Americans, should they fear the FBI? And let me add this term. Should law abiding Americans fear the FBI? That's what I wanted to ask.
I don't know if fear is the right word, but should they be wary of it? Yes, I think so. Okay. I'm both worn out by what the FBI has been involved in, and I'm also nervous the way that it operates. So I'm a law-abiding citizen. I have obviously never been involved in anything that would keep me from having a clearance, except the FBI pulled my clearance. And so I was able to be adjudicated positively for a background check at 35 years old. That should tell you something, because that's actually a much harder background check to do than the 18-year-old or the 22-year-old coming out of college that doesn't have any life experience. Like I said, I lived in the back of my car for a couple of weeks. I slept on my brother's couch for like probably a month or two while I was trying to figure it out. I had negative $500 in my bank account when I was in my 20s. And yet still, I had no problems being able to go through the background check and being able to be adjudicated positively to have this top secret clearance. It's the highest clearance that the government offers. It's garden variety for people who work in that industry. It's called a secured compartmented information read-in. And so I could have gotten I could have had a cure clearance when I worked at DOE, because I was working as an FBI liaison over some of those guys. So you end up with that. So I haven't done anything wrong, and certainly not enough wrong to do anything that would end up with law enforcement at my door. It doesn't mean I wasn't kind of like a goofy kid. Did I steal a stop sign when I was a kid at one point? Yeah, I did. Did I used to climb up on buildings and run around on private property and probably commit trespassing? Yeah. And I admitted to all those things in my background check. And it's kind of funny. The guy's like, so what is that? Like a misdemeanor? I'm like, I don't know. I just knew it was wrong and I did it. You asked what I did that was wrong. Now I told you. So, you end up with a sort of that background, and yet the FBI has a very realistic possibility of coming through my door at some point. And whether they'll do it or not is basically, I think, a question of how high a profile I maintain. Because if I let off the gas, there's a real chance that I end up with like some of my former colleagues trying to come in and interrogate me. And that's a scary feeling for me. And it should be scary for all other people as well.
And that is such an excellent point. It's almost as if, and guys, make sure you follow him Twitter everywhere at Kyle Seraphin. You spell his last name Seraphin. And of course, if you don't know by now, he is a former FBI agent. He is a former whistleblower as well. And now he's just a regular dude doing a podcast. You did one. What was it called? I just looked at it. I haven't had an opportunity to listen to it. Are the Nazis coming or something like that?
Yeah, that'll burn you. That might make you. You might want to do that at the end of the day when you don't need to like be positive for the rest of the day, because it's
sleep on it thing.
I'll tell you what. I wake up sometimes. Somebody always asks me. They're like, "Hey, what's your podcast going to be about today?" And I was like, "Man, I don't know." Sometimes I wake up and the Holy Spirit just moves me, and it's like, "This is what the podcast is about." Something pops up in my feed. Something someone sends me. It hits me just right, and then it's like I have an hour of content just off the top of my head. And this was one of those moments where it's like no guest, no questions, just laying it out there. And it came together very, very quickly. And honestly, I think it's one of the more impactful shows that I've ever put out there. And I've got maybe 75 episodes out there at this point. But, I went out there and kind of sent it. And I was like, man, I just scared the hell out of myself. My dad called me up. My dad's an old school radio guy. And he was like, man, I kept waiting for you to stumble over something. And it just all kept making sense. And it scared him. So, yeah, that's the most recent one that we did. That was from yesterday. And it's unsettling. So like I said, do it at the end of the day when you don't need to be positive, and you can go and relax and sleep on it.
All right. I'm going to listen to it this evening for that. for that very reason. So I look forward to that. I think I look forward to that podcast. So I will find out. But you can check out his podcast. So make sure you go and do that. And again, former FBI agent, former whistleblower. I just want to ask you on a personal level, Kyle. Listen, honestly, I gave you props yesterday on Prager's show. I know you don't consider yourself a hero. I'm talking to you. You're an absolute normal dude. Love that about you already. But you understand the gravity, obviously, of being an FBI agent, making a good salary. You have a family, and then you go from, hey, I'm going to do the right thing. This means that I'm going to lose my income. I'm going to be looking for work. The weight of the FBI on your shoulder, just try to the best of your ability, just explain for the audience, what does that feel like? I'm sure it's going to be hard for us to comprehend, but I just think I want to know. I'm being honest.
So the FBI, the DOJ are probably the scariest mechanisms that our federal government has to come after you domestically. It's easily one of the heaviest burdens you can pick up. I always told people, because I've done probably like 9 or 10 different whistleblowing activities. I keep doing them. People keep bringing me information and ask me to connect them to Congress. And sometimes they share it with me to go public, and I will. And I'm more than happy to do it. And every single time I feel like it's not David versus Goliath, because that's not really a good analogy. It's kind of like a regular guy fighting Godzilla, and all I have is a pocket knife. But if you can get those ankles where they bleed, and they do bleed because they have a lot of vulnerabilities, you can cause some real damage, even though you're only hacking at the ankle. And so that's kind of what it's like. And the other thing, I had somebody ask me the other day, and I don't know if it was you or if it was somebody else, because it blurred on me. But the scariest thing for me when I was growing up was dark. So, not lit, open water. I was a swimmer. I was used to swimming in pools where you could see the bottom. Okay. You knew what was going on. And I had this phobia about open water. I don't like swimming in lakes that much. There's stuff under there and I don't know what it is. And so it's not rational. I understand that people swim in lakes and they're fine. They've done it for all of human history. But it scares me a little bit. It gets my blood pressure up. It gets my heart rate going. And so when I was in the military, one of the things I did was, get in a boat with a bunch of dive gear and float out 2 miles off the shore in a bay in Florida, and then bail off into the darkness at the middle of the night, and then go check my partner's air and do all the surface checks, and then go underwater and then swim, a mile and a half or whatever it was underwater towards a dock in total darkness. And that should scare the heck out of me. But what I do is I focus on the job. And so you've got things you got to do. You got to count the number of kicks. You got to watch your watch. You got to make sure you check your depth gauge. You keep an eye on how much oxygen you have and all the other kind of things that you do that are mission oriented. And that's what I've been doing to kind of take my eye off or take my mind off, wondering, is the federal government going to come and try to put me in jail, take me away from my babies? Because I got a 5-year-old, I got a 4-year-old, I got a 2-year-old, and I got a baby that's going to be born in about 10 weeks. So,
wow, congratulations.
I'm right in the middle of all of it. And the reason I'm doing it is because of my kids. Because I don't want to have my kids look at me. And I just imagined it. It's like, let's say my kids are in their 20s and they eyeball me and they go, Dad, we're living under tyranny right now. And why didn't you do something about it?
Man,
and the answer is going to be at least I did. That's going to be my answer.
Man, praise God. And not to mention that you're contributing to the population growth rate. A lot of men aren't doing that in the United States.
We got to outbreed them. Look, leftism is a secular religion. I think we kind of touched on it the other day, but it's a secular religion, and it relies on converts and it relies on recruitment. And so the two things we're doing is we're homeschooling and we're teaching the kids our values. And when something happens, I was just watching Ada Twist Scientist. Do you know what that is?
No, I don't.
So it's a cartoon for children, and my kids have watched a couple episodes, and it's a cute little black girl, and she's got a little white friend and a little white girlfriend and whatever, and they're doing their kind of thing, and it's produced by the Obamas, and it's on Netflix. And we don't have Netflix, but my mom came in and plugged her account in, so my girls were watching it. They've seen probably 30 episodes of this thing. And it's a cute show. They talk about basic science and they teach kids, and they get girls interested in STEM or whatever. And I'm not real crazy about teaching girls outside of gender roles, but whatever. I got 2 daughters, so they can watch Ada Twist Scientist. It's got a cute song. It's catchy. It gets in your head. And so they're watching that. And yesterday, my wife and I we both heard something that sounded weird, and we both walked into the room because we've seen enough of it that we thought it was probably okay to leave them, and we didn't screen every episode. We walk in and it's 2 men getting married, and there are 2 dudes in tuxedos, and they're doing a gay wedding. What does that have to do with a little girl, who's doing scientific experiments to decide whether the cat falls on its feet? It just doesn't have anything to do with it. And so, first we were furious. My wife turned off the show right away, and my daughters looked, wide-eyed and scared. And I just knelt down next to them, and I got, like I said, 5 and a 4-year-old. And I explained to them in the most age-appropriate ways I could that these things don't represent the values that we're interested in, and they're not things that kids need to know about right now. And as you get older, we'll talk about them more, but we're not going to watch that show because they're trying to push something on you that is not compatible with the way that we believe things and the way that we learn at church. And my kids were like, okay. And then my 4-year-old said, Dad, we don't really understand what that was about anyway, and we don't really know what you're talking about. And I said, I know, that's good. That's fine. Because but that's what has to happen.
And that's the power of having a mom and dad in the home as well. I can tell you this: my wife and I, with my daughter back, literally, she's in her mid 20s now. But when she was a child, we used to sit down and we would watch different shows with her, Disney shows and all this kind of stuff. And I get a little frustrated because and I'll say it. I've mentioned it plenty of times. I love Trump. I love DeSantis. I'm not mad at DeSantis for running against Trump. I feel like, listen, with the poll numbers being as they are, even though I don't buy into the national poll numbers, I look at the state by state, but it's likely, at least at this point, that Trump will be the nominee. But I want a DeSantis in the race. I want a Vivek Ramaswamy in the race. And frankly, I want Larry Elder in the race, or at least on stage, because I think iron sharpens iron. And I think if you put those 4 guys together, they have the best ideas. And so when DeSantis is sitting here fighting this culture fight, and he goes, well, actually, Disney went after him first. The media forgets to relay that part. They went after him. They went after the Republican Party here. And then he's like, all right, screw it. This ESG crap, all this woke crap. All right, we're going to take away some of your special privileges, and you're going to be treated like, go figure, every other park in the state of Florida. And then conservatives, so-called conservatives, what are you doing? Going to get, and I'm like, are you crazy? I was watching Disney literally 20 years ago, watching their trajectory. And I'm like, frankly, guys, you're late to the party, so you should be thanking Ron DeSantis for taking on this battle, because all these woke corporations are lining up against you and against the average American, against everything that you believe in. I don't know why I just said that, Kyle, but let me get your response.
Well, it's true. We're fighting a spiritual battle in this country right now, and we are in the middle of a civil war. People don't want to admit it, that it is what it is, but it's a 5GW, that's 5th generation warfare, which is information based. And so it's not a kinetic war the way people are familiar with it. It's not an insurgency, counterinsurgency yet, thank God. And so it's not fought with weapons. It's fought with ideas, and it's fought with words, and it's fought with podcasts, and it's fought with, Disney trying to create an indoctrination of your children and all the things that go along with this. And so the resistance is you call it out and you say, this is not part of the values that I believe in, and then you don't support it with your ad dollars. And conservatives are starting to get a little bit of a sense that we don't want to get involved in the politics of what children do, but these companies don't give you a choice. And so I dropped my Disney Plus membership, and I love some Disney stuff. I mean, I grew up as a teenager watching things like The Little Mermaid with my baby sister, because someone had to watch her, and you had to sit there and be part of it. And the music is great, and the writing is clever, and it's written for 5 different levels of audiences, which is amazing. They had incredible products that they put out for a very long time, and they're not doing that. What they're moving is ideology. And here's the thing: I had people complaining about stuff like Frozen, and I've got 2 little girls, and they love some Elsa. So, we watch Frozen, and I'd listen to that soundtrack when I'm jogging half the time, because it's really good. And stuff like Moana, it's fantastic. I mean, they have brilliant stuff. What's the guy's name that did Hamilton? Lynn.
I forget his name. Honestly.
You know what I'm talking about, but he's incredibly talented. And so they bring some excellent artistic talent to the game, but they're also pushing something that is not part of the brand that most American parents want at that age bracket. And that's the really key thing. My kids don't need to know about, men marrying men, because they barely understand men marrying women. Like, they're 5 and 4, and this is the audience you're aiming at. It's, they want to say that they're trying to make it acceptable. It's like, no. I decide what's acceptable. I'm a parent. You can teach science. You can teach math. You can put things out there that are universal. But if you want to get involved in the culture war, I'm going to stop using your product. And so that's why it's really important. And I agree with you. The iron sharpening iron. People used to know that the primary is where we figure out what the platform looks like. And just because you're the top candidate doesn't mean you should be scared of everybody else. I don't think Trump has anything to fear in a primary of Republicans this year. What he should be doing is saying, look, I'm not even worried. And this is the thing I would give him if anybody asked me for advice. I'm not even worried about a Ron DeSantis or a Larry Elder or a Vivek Ramaswamy. I'm glad they're in the race giving their best ideas, because I want to see how those things poll. But I'm focused on the real problem, which is that our country is falling apart, that we have a president in the White House right now that barely knows that he's alive. And I'm focusing on the task of moving into that office again. Everybody else, like, I'm the presumptive nominee. I'm going to act like it.
Yeah.
Like, everybody is below me. And like, nobody is really competing. It's like when Michael Phelps was in the water. You were vying for second place. So that's what he should be looking at. And he said, all these people, if he went out there and said, look, everybody that's campaigning right now, they're just looking for a spot in my cabinet, and I'm looking forward to what they have to say to see where they're going to fit. Man, if he just acted like he'd already won and he was already going to be the president, it would go so far. And that's also on brand for Trump, to be fair. If he just had that kind of like that awareness.
I totally agree. I mean, I think if he were to come out and say, listen, I'm looking at one of these guys because they might be my VP, and we're going to take the best ideas. You guys know what I've done in the past. We're going to take the best ideas and we're going to shove them down the throat of these freaking leftists. I think the primary would be over today. Obviously, I would frame it in a different way. And it might be
over today anyway, because they indicted him, to be fair. Like, they basically did the same thing. This is like the Harry Potter thing, just for the pop culture types out there. And I love simple references, but it's like they ordained their champion by going after Trump in this way. They were taking some shots at DeSantis, but they chose Trump to be the one that's going to represent, because they went out there and they indicted him. And no one's ever done anything like that before. We are living in the upside down world.
I asked you this yesterday. I want to ask it again for the podcast audience. In my opinion, anyway, I think you're a hero because you had to step outside of the role of being an FBI agent, and you became a whistleblower. I'm not sure that you understood completely at the time what that meant, but you described it to us, and that would be scary, I'd imagine, for anyone. You told us how you stay focused, but did you imagine that you would probably be a bigger hero and fulfilling, in my opinion, a bigger mission by being a whistleblower as opposed to being an FBI agent?
So I didn't think being an FBI agent was a heroic thing. I don't think what I'm doing right now necessarily is a heroic thing. Maybe to my kids, because I think one day, like, I'll be able to look and I'll be real proud that my kids can see that. My wife and I have this laugh all the time where she looks over and she goes, who's that? And I'll just say somebody. It's like, I'm talking to Kash Patel, like I'm texting him or something. And she'll be like, right. Or I go, Seb Gorka just told me that he really likes the SIG MPX too, and I have a SIG MPX. It's a carbine. And she was like, yeah, he seems like a SIG guy. Like, we have that's the weirdest dinner table conversations you can imagine from what we used to talk about, which was like, I got to go, there was an Indian suicide up on the reservation and I got to go cut down a body. So, you move from one type of world to another type of world. And it's just very strange. It's a strange feeling, but, end of the day, do I think what I'm doing is heroic? No, I really don't. I think it's the expectation that when you sign up, I told people that I would hate the idea of an FBI director taking the job that wasn't prepared to lose that job. And I feel the same way about being an FBI agent in every way.
That's a great
If you're
point.
not willing to lose the job over what you swore that you would do, then how in the world are you going to try to claim that you're some sort of brave hero that's willing to lay down your life for the country and the Constitution? You're not even willing to lose your paycheck or your pension. So for me, it's a given.
Kyle, hold on, man. That is such a great point. I want that to resonate with people. That's the way we should feel about our politicians as well, by the way. But that was such a great point. I just wanted to resonate. All right. Sorry for interfering.
This is the danger that we're dealing with right now. And it's something I think I got into the podcast that I did yesterday. So when you listen to the Nazi one, you just go like, okay, yeah, I heard that already. The scary thing is this. Everybody assumes that your law enforcement officers, that your military members are willing to lay down their life and protect the Constitution, which is to say our way of life, our constitutional republic, the governing document. And mostly for law enforcement, it's not about they're willing to protect the Article 1 powers of Congress. That's not really what they're doing. And they're not saying, I need to protect the Article 2 powers of the executive. What they're saying is they are going to protect your liberties under the Bill of Rights. That's really where people kind of get down to the swear allegiance to the Constitution. And what they're going to do is they are not going to infringe on your protections when it comes to your protections from a regional search and seizure and your ability to practice your religion and so on. So these are the things that most people would associate with what that oath is. But if they're not willing to lose their job over it, how in the world can you imagine they're willing to get shot or killed over it? And, and then the second thing is this. Look at the way that these agencies treated their own people during the COVID tyrannies that went down, which was saying things like executive order 14043 said everybody had to get a COVID shot. I said, no, thank you. I made a pro-life argument as a lifelong Catholic and someone who's recently, gotten more enthusiastic about my faith. And I just said, it's not going to be, it's not going to happen. Do whatever you want. knowing that that might be the end of my job. And my wife and I had a very, very candid conversation. And I was like, hon, they'll probably fire me over this. And she said, that's okay. And I said, all right. She said, I have no fear. You're very capable. Like, I still mow my own lawn. I'm a very, I'm a very hands-on guy. Like I like to do my own automotive work if I can, even if I can afford to someone to pay it. I don't like to pay people to do things that I can do myself.
We kind of figured that much from you just from the part of the introduction.
Man, I do my own plumbing. I do my own electrical. Like I put dimmers in my house when it's like, if it's not outside of my range, I went out and I had a neighbor stand outside when I was in New Mexico and I needed to add a new breaker because I was wiring in a circuit for my RV. And so, I ran conduit, and I run the wires and I set up the new box and it's all ready to go, but I got to put the breaker in. I've never put a breaker in a box at this point. And so I'm standing there and my neighbor goes, do you need anything? I go, yeah, will you hold this 2x4? And if it looks like I'm dying, just knock me off it. And he goes, all right. And so, I kill the power to the house. I put in the new breaker and I tighten it down and I throw the power back on and it goes on and we plug in and the RV works. And he goes, I really feel like I helped. And I'm like, man, you really did, because it could have gone good. I have no idea. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just winging it, but I just do things on my own. And one of the things is like, end of the day, I might lose that job, but I've got a lot of capabilities. And one of the most important things for me was I joined the FBI when I was 35 and I just kind of laid out my resume of things I've done. And all that is to say is that if I lost that job, it would be losing a job. It wouldn't be losing who I was. Because I'm always Kyle Seraphin. I was always Kyle Seraphin.
Right.
I was a father and I'm a husband and I'm an American citizen. And that's really like the three big ones. And then the fact that I happen to carry a badge and a gun and have some federal authorities, like that was a job that was going to end at some point. And I always knew that. So I always knew that if I had to stand up against the agency, I would rather live in an America that I want to live in, whether I was an agent or not, instead of know that I was going to retire with that pension and be like under some tyranny. I don't want that. That's terrible.
Good stuff. Good stuff. You alluded to it earlier, but let's go back to the Trump, and we talked about him as a candidate, so to speak. But let's talk about the Trump arraignment. Obviously, this is the major news of the day. This obviously catapults Trump to the upper stratosphere when it comes to, listen, more than likely at this point, he's going to be the nominee. But let's talk about the rule of law turning on its head. I think this is a complete sham. And I'm not saying that Trump didn't do anything wrong. I want to make that emphatically clear. If you look at parts of the indictment, there were things that, if true, he certainly could have done much better. But then I look at Hillary Clinton with 33,000 emails that have just been completely wiped away. I look at the Oars. I look at the 51 CIA agents that signed this documentation that said that the Hunter Biden laptop was just Russian disinformation. You look at the information that's coming out about Joe and Hunter Biden. We all knew it all along if you were on the right, frankly, but the left is starting to find out that Joe Biden is corrupt as all get out. And I look at everything that they've done. I look at the presidents of the past, Vice President Pence, who I like, but I would never want him to be president. Right. I look at Biden when he was senator and VP, taking information or classified documents on, et cetera, and parking them behind his classic Corvette. I watched shows where they built those cars all the time. I don't know how he could afford that, except him being corrupt. But nonetheless, I'm ranting here a little bit, Kyle. But your take on the did you
as we are wont to do. That's a radio thing. You get used to just going with it.
But your take on the Trump arraignment today.
Yeah, sure. So the guys I used to work with when I moved to the surveillance team a lot of them were very senior in the FBI, and they were, getting close to retirement. Many of them are retired at this point. And one of the things that stood out to me is they said the difference in the agency from the time that they joined and when I joined in 2016, was that the FBI used to watch the crime and find the man. And now what it does is it finds a man and then it waits for the crime, or it discovers a crime by going after it. And that's a really troubling thing to do. We are dealing with an intelligence agency first and foremost that becomes, that still has the law enforcement capabilities. I actually told this to Seb Gork at one time. It's kind of funny. I'll drop it on you. I said the FBI is a trans intelligence agency, to play in the parlance of the time. It transitioned to being an intelligence agency, but it kept the bulge. And that bulge has a badge and a gun with it. And that's really scary stuff. So when you look at it in terms of sort of the culture war that we were dealing with, they bought into something. And my friend George Hill is an FBI whistleblower, and he said something really important as well. He said that the FBI let the definition of national security change on September 12th, 2001. It went from the continuation of our constitutional republic and the ongoing protection of that. And, you know, people die when you protect the republic. We probably know people. I know people that have. But the new definition is that no American can die from terrorism. And so they've accepted this new definition, and that means doing pre-crime. And so President Trump's scenario comes out of all of those background pieces. And I'll get to what I think. You know, the FBI broke protocol. They spent 7 years investigating the guy. They had phony FISAs that were lied to obtain. They went after people like Carter Page. They didn't give him defensive briefings that we found out in the Durham report in the same way they gave the Hillary Clinton campaign. Generally speaking, if they find out that there's somebody involved in your campaign or even in your business as a small business owner in America that is a potential threat or a counterintelligence issue, they will come and do a defensive briefing. That involves like a guy like me and somebody else sitting down with you and saying, here's what we can tell you. Here are the individuals that we're concerned about. This is why, as much as we can clearly say with or without a clearance, and we would really appreciate it if those people contacted you, if you reached out to us and we could debrief and maybe we create a plan to run them against themselves. And if that's a thing that people do, then like that's very, very normal. Like I said, I've done it with people who run power plants. I've done it with people who do water treatment plants in a county level. So you would assume that the lead nominee for a major political party in this country would get that same sort of treatment. And that was not the case. And so when we look at the indictment, you know, we had people from the Washington field office go down and do that search warrant. They flew down from Washington, D.C., even though there are plenty of FBI agents down in Miami, and I know many of them. And they didn't let people from the office in the area that things are supposed to be done execute the search warrant. Why? We even found out that the assistant director of the Washington field office, Steve D'Antuono, many people remember him because he used to run the Detroit field office when the Gretchen Whitmer case was going on.
Yep.
And Steve D'Antuono was running the Washington field office where I used to work. I spent 5 years there, and he had objections to using the tactics that they were doing. And he recommended, it's just coming out right now. There were a couple of things that have been slowly leaking out. And I don't know if his employer is telling him to come forward, but, you know, he was sullied by this investigation. And what he said is we should have sought consent. You should always seek consent when you're doing a search warrant when you can. If you're not doing a violent criminal who is likely to shoot back at you, where you got to go in with SWAT, then you let them know, hey, we're here. We have a search warrant, but we'd like your consent to search these areas. You get buy-in, because if the judge throws out the search warrant, you still have the consent. You always try to insulate yourself. 2 is 1, 1 is none. You should do that. It's best practice. It's the reason why a cop may have probable cause to search your car, but they'll still ask you. They'll say, hey.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
They're trying to get consent. It's just a very simple thing. It's like, well, it's on body cam. The person agreed to me searching the vehicle, and I found whatever I found. And they can withdraw that consent at any time, but you might as well get it if you can.
Man, okay, that's fascinating. I got to tell you, because I read Julie Kelly, incessantly, and from AM Greatness. If you guys are listening, you know, I've had her on before. Follow her; she does amazing work when it comes to the J6 protesters and so on. But I remember reading columns about Steve. I can't pronounce his last name.
D'Antuono.
D'Antuono. And is that a CYA move on his behalf? Or
I think he probably thought that was the right move. It is the right move. The right move is seeking consent. And apparently the people that resisted him were people that worked for him. It was the special agent in charge of counterintelligence. And I've got friends still working in the CI program up there. So what you've got is your underling and, you know, one step below you on the rung, but you're the boss. And he let those people talk him into doing something that he was not comfortable with. Wow. And that tells you what kind of a leader he was. He got bullied around by people below him all the time. And so he's not a strong person. He has a spine of jello. And, you know, I don't think he's a bad person. I think that he got pushed into a bunch of stuff because he's not a principled person. And that's the real danger. And so D'Antuono has recently come out and stated, he's like, you know, I had problems with it. They've leaked some of those conversations. And I don't know what the aim is, why he's trying to put it out there. But it's definitely a cover your ass kind of thing when you've got a search warrant and consent, because you've now covered both bases. It's like, look, whether the judge agrees or not, whether it's actually found to be an invalid search warrant in the motions that are filed, because that's what they're going to file, that the search warrant was overly broad. It was a general warrant. It's in violation of the Fourth Amendment. And so therefore his civil liberties and his due process was violated. That's what they're going to claim. And I think with good cause. I think it'll be interesting to hear any arguments against it. But if you had consent, it'd be a different animal. And you know what? Then you wouldn't have any of those obstruction charges either. So that's the other fun thing. The FBI has been working in different processes. And you mentioned Julie Kelly. So I talked to Julie as well. She's awesome. And one of the fun things about Julie's reporting is that it shows these people for January 6th are getting hit with criminal complaints.
Yeah.
And that is not common. generally speaking, when you're going to go after someone who is either nonviolent or has been cooperative, you do a grand jury indictment. You bring your facts in front of the grand jury. The federal grand jury returns what's called a true bill, which means that you will now have the opportunity to tell the judge that you want to bring that person into custody for what's called an initial appearance, which is what Trump is doing today. And the initial appearance is very easy, and it's not a big deal. You bring them in front of it. It's often called an arraignment, and but we call it the initial. And so when they are brought in front of that, that's when you may, you may not need an arrest warrant to do that. You can do what's called a summons, which is what President Trump experienced. They sent over to the lawyers, hey, make your safe available at this time, show up at the court date. If they don't show up, then you go and get an arrest warrant and you go hunt them down. And that's what the Marshal Service does. And they could have done that. But what they've been doing is a criminal complaint, because a criminal complaint is something that the FBI uses only in exigent circumstances. And if you go back and look at the J6 defendants, almost all of them are hit with criminal complaints, even though they're not served in an exigent way. They'll say, we need to arrest this person right now. We can't wait to go to grand jury. We got to get it. And then they go knock down the door because it comes with an arrest warrant that they don't have to ask permission. They don't have to do a summons because it's based on effect. And so my friend Steve Friend and I talk about the process being the punishment. Trump is experiencing the process as punishment in a big, big way.
Man, I love that. I mean, I love the fact that you're on and can break this stuff down in a way that I've not heard before, frankly. So I definitely appreciate that. I wanted to ask you this. Oh, you know what? Let me go back to something you said, because I just want to make something clear for the listening audience. On 9/12/2001, effectively, the FBI became an investigative agency or an intelligence agency, as opposed to just a law enforcement agency. So now they have the power of both, right? They investigate, they can enforce laws on a federal level. So they became just dangerous. It kind of shifted. I just want to make that. Okay.
Yeah. So Seb Gorka and I were talking on his show the other day about it becoming sort of a secret police. And the hallmark of a secret police is having intelligence capabilities. They have secret tools like, FISA and FISA 702 coverage. And they have the ability to do things like, issue secret subpoenas that are signed off on by the FBI, not by a grand jury. And so those things, and then when you still have enforcement powers, then that is what secret police do. And in the analogy of the transition, it's not an immediate thing. You don't wake up one day and then suddenly have, transgender surgery and a bunch of hormones in your body. It takes time to build that up. And so the FBI had a gradual transition to this. I think most people think it peaked somewhere between 2010 and 2015, where that transition happened in a very meaningful way. So by the time I showed up at the Bureau, it was already that thing. And they already had in what's called the DIOG, which is the FBI's sort of operations Bible. It's the Domestic Investigation Operations Guide. It lists FBI as intelligence agency as the number one. It's the first thing that's listed. The second thing that's listed is FBI as law enforcement. And so you can even take their own word on it. They believe that they are that up front. My first email address with the FBI was Kyle.Seraphin at IC for intelligence community.fbi.gov. And if you email that now, you probably won't get anything. They'll probably come get you. But I see intelligence community. That's still the way that. So now they all have them at FBI.gov because they shortened it. But everybody still has an email address. If you were to send to any FBI agent at ic.fbi.gov, that is still a domain that they possess.
Wow, that is okay. So that is fascinating, which leads me to my next question, which you already answered, but I just want to make it clear for the audience that might be tuning in for the first time and they didn't hear you answer yesterday. I asked you, what was the pivot point for you being an FBI agent? When did you realize that, oh my God, the FBI agency is not what I thought? You basically answered, but let's kind of rewind and put that question in there if we could here, Kyle.
Yeah, day one. So it's a day one thing. I walked in and the first thing that I saw was this is not the world that I thought I was joining. So look, it helps to understand the background that I came out of and what my expectations were, which may have been unrealistic. I came in thinking that I was going to a paramilitary academy that was going to be an elite organization. And that's not to say that people were not elite on paper, but when they put on their spikes and got on the field, a lot of these people were utterly unimpressive. They had they do this thing. It's like a punishment, motivational PT is what we would have called it in the Air Force, where you're like on your knuckles on some concrete and you're like holding the push-up position. You're supposed to do push-ups. And they dropped us on our knuckles for the first time. And it only happened one time in my academy career. And apparently this was like daily for the old school agents. So they drop you on your knuckles, you're in the push-up position, and we're just holding a plank. Right. Now, I've been hit with a fire hose holding the push-up position for hours in the desert sun on gravel
Wow.
when I was in the Air Force, out in Kirtland Air Force Base. And so, you know, it's not fun. Like, no, but it's actually hilarious. But because when you're doing it, you're like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. I get paid for this. But I did that at the FBI Academy, and I kept hearing the sound that I've never heard before. And I'm looking around, and it was like painful grunting and whining and like simpering like a whining puppy. And there were women and men in my class that were making noises of weakness. And I've never experienced that before. And that would have been embarrassing. Like nobody would have had the guts to even make that noise. The motto used to be suffer silently when we would do these kind of things in the Air Force. And I think most military branches would agree. I was in a different part of the Air Force than most people. I trained to be a combat controller and a pararescueman. So that's not common per se in the Air Force, but there is a mentality of like, be strong, be aggressive. You know, if you're going to put your life on the line, you should at least be tough. And that is a virtue as opposed to what was going. And the FBI Academy had all these people sort of like whimpering and crying. And I had the lead instructor, who was this tiny little guy, and awesome. And his name was Mr. Brown. And Mr. Brown looks over at me, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. Like I didn't say. He looks over, and you know, I just gave him the eyebrow, like I don't understand what we're involved in. And I think he was also disgusted. And so it's a different animal when that's what you came into. And I expected to be like, have just a bunch of like hard chargers that wanted to go out there and defend the Constitution and thought they might have to run into, you know, danger zones and be up there to defend the Constitution. That's not what it is. It's a lot of indoor dogs. It's a lot of people that were former analysts and they used to work in some sort of administrative role with the FBI. And now they're being promoted to agent. And I don't know why, you know, but most of the FBI's job does not involve danger. 99.9% of the FBI's job does not involve danger. So this idea that like the men and women of the FBI are risking their life every day for freedom, it's complete garbage. It's totally garbage. And anybody who's doing that is trying to puff up this sort of false bravado, which I also abhor. Like, let's be honest. Most of the FBI job are done from behind a computer. SWAT guys face a little bit of danger, sometimes dangerously making entry in places that I'm not even sure is a good idea, especially with the J6 stuff. Guys that did surveillance like I do, there's danger because you're out in the world. But I will tell you this in no uncertain terms, Carl. A mailman for the United States Postal Service faces more danger on a daily basis than an FBI agent does across the board. Wow. And if people put that, like, do you worship your mailman and think that they're some proud, brave person? Probably not. Just saying. They're on the road. Wow. They're around dogs. They're around people. They're in lousy neighborhoods delivering the mail. That's far more dangerous than the average FBI agent's day. Doesn't mean that you couldn't have more danger. I'm just saying, on average, across the entire spectrum, postal workers face more danger.
You know what's crazy? It reminds me of, I don't know which founder said it. I believe it was John Adams, that our Constitution is made only for I believe it's a holy and moral people. It's totally inadequate. I know I'm jumbling it up here for any other type of people or whatever. But just based upon what you shared, it just hit me, and I don't know why, but it did. Obviously, when you're in positions of leadership, you have to have people with the utmost character. I mean, just simply, you have to have people with the utmost character. Obviously, the physical ability as well, and mental ability or acuity as well. But you have to have people with outstanding character. If they're going to be in politics, if they're going to be in law enforcement, the people with the utmost character is what we need to have. And sadly, that's missing big time in the United States of America right now.
That was actually the conclusion of the Durham report.
Oh, that's right.
A lot of people didn't read what the corrections were. He said there's no amount of policy, there's no amount of training that is going to change this. It's going to take people that are committed to the constitutional principles doing that work. And if we don't have that, then we are not going to see an FBI that is reformed. There are principles the FBI claims to be able to follow, which is fidelity, bravery, and integrity. Right. And I would say that all those are lacking, at least on the leadership level. But you know, the question is always like, did the FBI rot from the top? And then that's the reason why it, just gut the management and we'll be fine. It was people that were brand new agents. It was people that were frontline agents that did the job I did as a GS-13 that knocked down the door of places like Mark Haupt, the pro-life protester, Catholic man up in Philadelphia. And it was people that were guys like me that went into the house of the former president at Mar-a-Lago. These things are carried out by everybody. So you have to have buy-in when that happens. And that's really what the whole point of my last podcast about the Nazis is the concept of a good German should be a ringing indictment of people working in our federal service right now. If you are willing to go along to get along, to keep your paycheck, to keep your pension, to make sure that you retire comfortably, you get that medical coverage, and you're willing to live in tyranny to do so, and you just say yes because that's your job. Your job is not to follow illegal, immoral, or unethical orders.
Right.
If you do so, you are complicit. You could be hung at the Nuremberg trials, as they saw in the 1940s. So it's a very dangerous concept that people have this. They think, well, I'm just doing what I'm told. Well, yeah, you're not allowed to do that. Like, you actually are not supposed to just do what you're told. You're supposed to be a thinking, discerning person. Your oath predates and precedes any orders that you would have, and you have no loyalty to the agency. You're paid by the American people to do a job. So go out and do it.
That brings me to another question. That's it made me think of something else. My dog is back in here, if you guys can hear. Anyway, getting back to rank and file, then you've heard people say, I've heard conservatives say, rank and file isn't the issue. It's just the leadership. From the outside looking in, I would disagree with that perspective, because I think there should be more people like you that should have come out and said, screw it. I mean, Constitution first. What's your take on that? Is rank and file, that's not the problem in the FBI? It's just the leadership?
No, it's everybody that's willing to accept orders. So here's the deal. My frontline supervisor, that's one level above me. He's a GS-14, which is not a powerful position, a supervisory special agent.
Okay.
And when I brought up my concerns, both about getting the COVID shots and everything else, he said, I agree with you. My wife didn't want to get them either, but she had to get them. Remember, had to get them for her job.
Wow.
It's like, you don't have to do anything. There just might be consequences that befall you should you choose to hold your principles. And he said, I would love to stand with you, but I've got alimony and I've got a mortgage and I've got to pay those things. And so I can't. I'm 2 years away from retirement. If that is the mindset, and like I said, if you're not willing to lose your job over it, how in the world are you planning on dying for this country should that opportunity or that requirement arise? And I don't think most people will. It brings us to a historical precedent. There is a great example of this. The book is called Ordinary Men. I think we talked about this the other day. This is the Reserve Police Battalion 101.
Yeah, right.
And this was a group of Germans who were city cops and they were sheriff's deputies, essentially. And they went into Poland and they were responsible for killing thousands. And they were shooting infants and old people that were too slow getting on the boxcars, going off into the death camps and the work camps. And the reason you get to that is because they followed the original order, which was go get all the names of the Jews. Man. And then go make sure that they all get evicted from their homes. And then go make sure they all wear this band. And so I'm not saying that people who dealt with COVID tyranny in this country, and there was some for sure, people that dealt with the tyranny, whether you were in the transportation industry or the medical industry or even the entertainment industry or law enforcement, government, I'm not saying that those people were treated like the Jews in the Holocaust. That's ridiculous. I'm saying that the government agencies were acting like the Nazis. And that is a really, really scary pathway to walk down, because I see a straight line from compliance with tyrannical policy and genocide. It doesn't mean that we don't have some off-ramps. God, I hope we have them. But it's a real, really dangerous thing to think that people are willing to walk down the road and they're just going to put their head down and quote unquote, I'm just doing my job. I'm just following orders. That's a genocidal path.
You know what, man, it's such a great way to put it. Just the other day, Kyle, I did a podcast on, I forget what I titled it. Honestly, the Holy Spirit just brought it to me. I was literally getting ready to fill in for, I think it was Prager or someone else. Yeah, Prager the week before that I had you on. And it was like, it was like the Holy Spirit told me, not in an audible way for those of you that think I'm a nut job, but it was just so clear. It was clear as day. 12 ways the left is depopulating the earth. And I'm like, and I just started jotting these things down. And I'm like, these are the things, these are the ideas that lead to straight up genocide. Right. And I did a podcast on them, but anyway, so what you said, it struck a chord with me. So anyway, good stuff here.
Let me throw one more thing out there for the audience to think about. And this is, everybody has responsibility in this. So I don't want it to just be like, I'm not pointing fingers at any one person. There were things that happened in 2020 when churches were shut down across this country.
Yep. And
Christians stopped going into churches because they were told not to go into them. I just want everyone to understand. And there's a concept of red and white martyrdom. Are you familiar with these terms?
I'm not.
So red martyrdom is the classic Christian martyr. That's the person who dies for their faith. And many of us are familiar with that idea, fed to the lions, take your pick, whatever it was. There are a lot of awful ways that people died for their faith. White martyrdom is like being excommunicated from society, losing your job, losing social standing because you chose to stand up for your faith. And that is a thing that many of us should probably aspire to in this country. It's really important to have a attitude of white martyrdom, because if you're not going to be a white martyr, you're sure as hell not going to be a red martyr. That's not an option. So this is the baby step towards it.
I don't know why I didn't know that, honestly, but that is fascinating.
I learned this in the last year. So this is all stuff that's come to me that people have shared with me. And you want to talk about inspiration of the Holy Spirit. Here was my thought. The early Christians were willing to celebrate Mass. They were willing to celebrate the sacrifice of the Savior in the catacombs under Rome, under the streets of the city where their ancestors were rotting next to them. That's where they went. They were driven underground to celebrate the religious ceremonies that were important to them, because it was that important that they do so. And we had people that didn't even show up to churches because the government just said no. We don't even know what the penalty would have been. They were like, people were so easily told, don't go there, and they did it. And so that should be a wake-up call, a clarion call to people that believe to profess a faith. For me, it's a really big deal. And it actually drove a wedge between me and what the Catholic Church was doing at that time, because they were compliant. And it's like, how dare you? How dare you shut down your church because some local political figure told you to do it? Our ancestors were fed to lions over this stuff, and they were willingly able to die over it. And we were scared simply to get a ticket. That's a thing that people should take to heart. We're all guilty of that sort of thing. Yeah. And so, but people can draw that line and fix it right now. That's the other thing. Fix it in your heart. My buddy likes to say prepare or repair. He's a Long Island guy. And that's really a simple way of looking at the world. But if you are not prepared, then you're going to have to fight your way back up to it. You got to repair and get back up to the line you lost.
And it's a lot harder to repair.
God.
And I share that. Listen, I'm a Christian. I share that sentiment with you. Thank God I go to a Bible believing church where we didn't shut down, but we live in the state of Florida. I mean, Ron DeSantis, we shut it down for maybe like a couple of weeks, few weeks. And then it was like, all right, screw this stuff. And honestly, I never had that mentality. I was like, screw you. I mean, from the very beginning, if I went into some place, my wife was the same. You got to wear a mask. All right, screw you. We'll never come here again. That was, that was my mentality. And thank God we go to a church that has that mentality. But I was shocked. I cannot lie, to see the number of evangelical churches that shut down around me, literally for 2 years, Kyle, and some of the Black evangelical churches as well. I was listening to some of them that would give video presentations online, and they were parroting some of the talking points of BLM. I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, these freaking cultural Marxists have had a bigger impact in the Black community than the Black church does. Now I go to a well-mixed church, but that was my thought. I was just watching other people and other churches, and I'm like, Black Lives Matter has had a bigger impact in Black communities around here than the Black Christian church. And it just pissed me off, because when they should have kept their doors open, and they absolutely did not. And they did it in the name of safety and loving your neighbor. And I'm like, man, it's just total BS. You guys are a bunch of cowards. I didn't mean to get onto that.
You get into a sermon. Sometimes you just got to go with it. I feel you.
Oh man, it's so frustrating. Let me ask you this. Just a couple more questions here, Kyle. Can the FBI be saved? I'm an outsider that's looking in, and I'm like, no way. These people are freaking corrupt. I'm scared of them. I'm just being frank with you at this point. I look at what they're doing with those J6 prisoners, and I'm like, that can be any one of us. And I'll be honest, I feel like all of the GOP candidates, I think they need to be doing more. I think they need to be doing campaign freaking things right in front of that jail, whatever it takes. I don't think Trump is doing enough. I don't think DeSantis is doing enough. That's what scares me, being a J6 protester in jail without hope, without civil liberties. And I think of the FBI, and I'm like, can this thing be saved?
I don't think so. I won't trust the FBI. My kids won't trust the FBI. They're already, they're young people, but they get it. And and I think a lot of Americans won't trust it either. Like, you tarnish that badge. It's a thing that's supposed to be, it'll take generations of agents to be able to bring it back, and they are not doing anything to do so. So are we going to destroy the FBI? Is the government going to defund it? I don't think so. Like, I just don't think there's any political will or courage to do so. They're all scared of it for some reason. But the FBI actually shut down during 2020 and 2021 as well. And they started showing up on the national security side, which is counterintelligence and counterterrorism. They were not coming into work more than 30 minutes twice a week. So 2 different days, they would come in for half an hour. When they looked at the Washington field office, which is the center, it's one of the 2 biggest counterintelligence operations in this country for protecting us from spies and whatever. New York field office is probably the biggest, or at least they think it is, and Washington field would say they're the biggest. It doesn't make a difference. We didn't have any work that needed to be done, apparently, because here's the way that it worked out. They did an analysis of maybe 1,000 to 1,500 cases. This is all the cases worked by like over 100 agents on the floor I used to work, which is the 6th floor of the Washington field office. And in that skiff, when they looked at all those cases, 1,500 or so cases, how many of those cases do you think needed a daily update? What number or what percentage would you guess required daily updates because they were so critical?
You said 1,500 cases.
Yeah, in a place where all of the embassies are and all the legal attachés and all the apparatus of government is, how many counterintelligence cases require daily updates, would you say?
Counterintelligence cases? I would think a good portion of them. I don't know, 60, 70%? Where are we at?
2.
Wait. Counter
2 cases, not even 2%. 1, 2. Those are the 2.
Counterintelligence cases.
Right. This is spies and traitors. This is the stuff that theoretically the FBI has got it locked down, and this is the big threat to democracy and all the other things that you hear the left talk about. There were 2 of them. And so the rest of these cases are fluff.
Can you give me a minute to recover here, Kyle? I'm holy crap. Are you for real?
Yeah.
I mean, I know you're for real, but are you for real? Like, seriously?
And that's something. It's troubling.
Oh,
because a lot of this is,
my God.
One of the things I learned right away at the FBI Academy, and my buddy and I have coined this term and we use it. And whenever we say it to people that know, they're all like, oh yeah, wow. Whenever you tell cops always know right away. And if any law enforcement's listening to this, they'll be like, yeah, that's right. Doesn't mean there's not good people, but the FBI is what we call federal law enforcement cosplay. Their dress up. They put on the apparatus. You'll see women wearing their body armor and they look ridiculous. They don't make sense. They'll put their magazine pouch right over the top of where their gun is so they can't even draw their own gun if they needed to. They look like law enforcement if you don't know what you're looking at. There was a picture Miami put out the other day. It showed a girl. She had a rifle magazine, but no rifle. She had a tourniquet that was shoved in one of her magazine pouches. And then she had like trash or snacks or something in the other pouch. And she's got an American flag patch that is 1/3 of the way on. It's holding on barely by the Velcro. It's on the wrong side. And she's standing there and she's real pretty. And she's wearing this FBI hat. And it's like, that's the FBI in a microcosmic way. It is very good to look at until you drill down at it. And then you go like, that person has things that make no sense going on. That is an FBI that I experienced. It is a bunch of people that are really proud of themselves. They think they're first responders, even though they're 3rd or 4th responders. The first responders are the cops. The second responders are the paramedics and the firefighters. The 3rd responder is going to be like the coroner, and the 4th responder is the FBI. We're the last ones to the scene because we're the investigators. You're not a first responder. And they want to grapple with that honor and the integrity that we see for our people that run into harm's way. And generally speaking, they don't do it. And so it looks very law enforcement-like. And yet it is not. It's an intelligence agency with a bunch of indoor dogs. And some of those people are outdoor dogs. And they are doing a job that they don't understand because they came in to be investigators and to go get bad guys. And they're not allowed to do it. So the good people that do work for the FBI are being hindered by that agency in a dramatic fashion. It's really troubling for them every day. And so the only way that they can do that job is put their head down and not know anything else that's going on. I talked to an agent in April of 2022. In my supervisor's office, we were talking about the Hunter Biden laptop. We were laughing about some stuff that had come out about it. And he said, what is that? Is this new information? And that's 2022 in April. And he worked on a national security squad that theoretically dealt with Russian items and other things like that. And he had never heard this information because they bury their heads in the sand and they don't know what's happening. They don't even know they're the bad guys right now. And that's why you can't save it.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Honestly, I almost don't know what to say. I think you have just made the best case that I've ever heard for shutting down the FBI. And I don't even know that was, well, you answered my question, but I don't know that was your intention. I'm sitting here thinking counterintelligence. If it's counterintelligence, I would suspect that would be a very high priority because there's some dangerous people that the FBI has to get to. And so I'm thinking, obviously, it's got to be a high percentage that they're paying attention to. But wow, not even 2%, just 2 out of 50. That is, and they want to get a bigger building in Washington, D.C.
That's right.
Wow. Okay. Wow. I almost don't know what to say. I'm not even going to lie to you. It's
not a good situation, Carl. I mean, it's just not good.
Away.
It's troubling. It's upsetting. People should be upset about it. They should be worried about what we're talking about. And it's the worst case scenario because you took a storied institution and a legacy of integrity that people have looked on for a long time. I get former agents reaching out to me, retired agents and stuff like that. There's a whole society of these guys, and they're really mad about the stuff that people like me and Stephen Friend and Garrett O'Boyle are saying. And they're mad because they think that the FBI exists the way that they lived with it, but it's not the same FBI. It's gone. It's a different thing. It is transitioned into a thing that they would not recognize. If they went and worked there, they wouldn't be able to survive either. You know, in the old days, if someone didn't like what you did, they didn't like your politics, they didn't like the way that you handle it, they thought you were kind of a jerk, then they would find a job for you and you'd be in charge of a broom closet somewhere and you'd work out your days. I had guys that were utterly useless that had 25 years on the job. They had never been functional. They were incapable of following simple instructions, but they were nice people and they got to have that government paycheck every 2 weeks. And so they let them retire as FBI special agents. My buddy would call them 25-year mistakes. I think that's a funny term, but we used to keep those people around. Now there are 700 internal investigations, maybe more, into FBI agents. That's 5% of the workforce of FBI agents. 700 internal investigations. Almost all of them, I am sure, are so-called unvaccinated Christians. They are ready to throw these people out because they did not toe the party line, and they identified themselves by having to swear and attest to their vaccine status in 2021. I was one of them. Garrett O'Boyle was one of them. Stephen Friend was one of them. My buddy Phil Kennedy was one of them. There's a bunch of others, and they've all been thrown out the door. If you did not comply, you're on the hit list, and they will toss you out by simply removing your security clearance, which is what they did to me, and you have no right to appeal it. I went for a year without pay because of it, because they considered me an employee, even though they hadn't paid me in a year. They took my badge, my gun, and said, you're no longer an FBI employee. But by the way, you're beholden to all of our policies and our rules, and you have to do what we say. And you can't go earn an income anywhere else unless you quit. But
Unbelievable.
That was my experience. And that's why I went public with it. It's like, look, this is not a good agency. This is not a good way to operate. And there was no protection for whistleblowers because there's no teeth. There's no teeth in that law. And, it's 5 USC 2303 is the Whistleblower Protection Act for FBI. Nothing happens if you violate it. You don't go to jail. You don't lose your job. You don't get fined. Nothing happens. Zero things.
Freaking wow. I started thinking about the persecution of Catholics from the FBI and parents. It all makes sense. And you probably got a bunch of woke social justice warriors there.
It doesn't have to be a lot of them, to be honest, and all those things were things that I exposed because they needed to be exposed. Like, that's the right thing to do. I went forward with the memo about parents. That was very simple. I just went to Congress. I didn't know it was going to be public. By the time that I got in the position to receive the document showing a intelligence product into Catholics, recommending source recruitment in the Catholic Church. And like I say, I've been a Catholic for 41 years. Not always the best Catholic in the world. There's no doubt about that. But, we strive imperfectly to do better. And you find out that the FBI wants to come after you. Here's the thing that should really shock your listeners. They didn't come after Catholics because of some sort of uniquely Catholic thing. They noted that people who like the Latin Mass had common cause with white supremacists, get this logic going, because they would agree on the same positions when it comes to abortion, which is a basic Christian principle. They would agree about legal immigration is the only way that we should have people come to this country. So rule of law, that's a position. And then they also, that Christians in general oppose specialized rights and training and gender ideology for LGBTQIA people. And so those positions are enough to justify the FBI infiltrating your church. If your church holds the same positions as the Catholic Church, which I think all Christian churches do, you're on the list too. It's not just Latin Mass Catholics that are on the chopping block with that case. And that should scare the hell out of people because that is a First Amendment protected activity. The government has no interest or business going in there. The Constitution is a leash that forbids them from going that direction. And it doesn't stop them from writing that document. And then when we put it out there, they weren't ashamed that they wrote it. And they didn't say, we're re-educating our intelligence analysts. They were ashamed that they got caught. And they said, don't embarrass the FBI. Anything could be leaked. This is the stuff that they told the analysts right afterwards that I'm privy to that other people aren't. And they said, we have to protect the brand of the FBI, not we have to do what's right. That is an indictment of the FBI. And that tells me it can't be saved.
Wow. Kyle, listen, I talk all the time, man. I'm usually not this silent. I'm just sitting back. I'm taking this stuff in. This has been fascinating, so much so that I forgot to even talk about my sponsor for today. So I do have to do that before we close. Guys, I got to thank Mike Lindell at MyPillow. Without him and our other sponsors, but Mike Lindell for sponsoring today's podcast. This show would not be possible. Please support mypillow.com, American jobs, American manufacturing, and a guy that loves America. All right. You get the new special, the buy one, get one free offer of the new MyPillow 2.0. All you have to do is go to mypillow.com, click on that promo code, enter my name, Carl, C-A-R-L, or give them a call, 800-858-0263. The new MyPillow 2.0 has the same patented adjustable feel as the original MyPillow, but it's softer, smoother, and cooler. I sleep on it every night. I absolutely love it, and you're going to love it too. Buy one, get one free. MyPillow.com. Enter my name, Carl. 10-year warranty, 60-day money-back guarantee. You cannot beat that with a bat. Kyle Seraphin, I asked you this yesterday. I just want to ask for the pleasure of the audience. Do you have Republicans on the Hill contacting you? Kyle Seraphin, what should we be doing about the FBI at this point? Obviously, you've been there, done that. Very knowledgeable. If they're not willing or they don't have the courage to dismantle it, surely you could talk about modifications to the FBI. Is someone, Kevin McCarthy, Speaker McCarthy, any of the leadership up there, is anyone calling you about this matter?
No, nobody is. I've been a one-way street giving things to Jim Jordan's office. I got a pretty good pipeline up there. I did get a phone call from Senator Ron Johnson, but I was on the toilet, so I couldn't take it. And he hasn't called back.
Next time, Senator, next time.
Hey, look, I got priorities, man. And like, I got a VA disability that tells you I'm going to be on the toilet for like a fair part of the morning every day. So it's just what it is. But yeah, you end up with these connections. I've got people like Kash Patel who are in my circuit. I got guys like Dan Bongino and Gorka, and some of them all have contacts. And so I feed information via the sources that I can to the people that need to hear it. And whether they do something about it, that's on them. I'm going to keep doing what I do. What I'm going to do is say what I know is true, say what I believe, and I'll always, differentiate Kyle's opinion versus what is factually happening. And then it's their job to do their job. And we can't make anybody do their job if they don't want to do it. And we should probably be voting people in that have that courage to conviction. The only person that I want to give a complete ringing endorsement of, and I've never met the guy, but he has been an outstanding supporter of my group that we call the Suspendables. And that's Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend and my buddy Phil and George Hill, is Matt Gaetz. And he showed up. He cool. showed up to the testimony and to the depositions my guys did. And so he personally was there, and that's really good stuff. And that is something that I think is very reputable. If you're going to put your personal time on the list, that's the minimum they could do for these guys. But he's the only one that I know of that was physically there that showed up. There was one other guy, I think it was Dan Bishop as well, that did it. I don't know Dan Bishop that well. I don't have a lot of connections over to him, but good for him as well for doing those things. So those are two names that I can say, they at least showed up. And that is more than I can say about anybody else. And, look, they all have my phone number and they can call me anytime they want. I think they're scared of putting me in front of an audience of, a hearing, because I won't be polite. I'd be scared of putting me out there too. Like, honestly, I'm a little scared about going out there because if they ask me to swear in, the answer is no. I will not swear that everything I say is, under oath, unless you do the same thing, Senator, Congressman.
Man,
like, you get under oath too, because you're going to sit here and lie about me. Like, I want you to perjure yourself if you want to be that kind of person. And so I'm not polite. I don't need to be. I'm combative.
Good. Honestly, yeah. That's what we need. We need more of you. And listen, I'm going to be filling in a lot in the next month. I know you're getting more opportunity, and I'm thankful for it. I pray to God that you absolutely blow up. I think your voice needs to be heard. But I'd love to have you on. I love to have your homies on as well. The other Suspendables. I'd like to get their stories out as much as possible. When I first started filling in nearly a couple of years ago, I would have Julie Kelly on often because it seemed to me like Republicans just weren't paying attention to her. I heard her on Prager once and I was like, who is this chick? And I started reading everything she had to say. And I was like, this is the number one issue. I do not want to fear my government. I don't want to fear that I'm going to be locked away and absolutely nothing could be done about it, like they're doing with the J6 political prisoners. Is honestly what I call them. I know everyone's not guilty, but for God's sakes, they did a lot of them. It was just misdemeanor crap. You typically
that's right.
Typically you go to court or whatever, you get a slap on the wrist. You may get some probation with this type of stuff that they get. It's absolute nonsense. But I'd love to have you on to as much as possible to just preach the truth. This is the number one issue, in my opinion. If we don't have the rule of law, we don't have law and order in America, we do not have anything. So
that's all
the way that I feel.
I'd be happy to.
All right, man. Kyle, I really appreciate you, man. Stay with me for just a minute as I close out, and then Gabe is going to make sure we get everything uploaded here. But I appreciate you taking the time to do today. I really do. I'll be honest, you scared the crap out of me. Everything I thought about the FBI it's actually even worse. So I really do appreciate that. And now I'll to close out my evening, I'll make sure that I listen to your podcast later so I can get even more horrified.
Yeah, have a little bit of anxiety before you close your eyes. That'll be good.
All right. I look forward to that. Anyway, guys, listen, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. You can check me out all things social media at the Carl Jackson Show. Check me out on YouTube and Rumble. Make sure you rate and review. Give us a 5. That'll help us move up the charts. I'm sorry. My brain is fluttering all over the place. All right. You know where to find me. So please check out the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, social media at the Carl Jackson Show. Until next time, do not grow weary doing good. God bless you all.